Romilly Maidew, congratulations on your new role. Now, infrastructure is put out there as the great stimulus for the economy. Can it really do that?
Infrastructure at the moment really is reflecting and responding to the population growth in Australia. So the Governor of the Reserve Bank made a comment the other day about the importance of infrastructure investment, but really that's in response to the population growth in Australia. I'm not sure I'm best placed to comment on stimulus to the economy, but I would say that it really is the age of infrastructure. We now have 2 infrastructure ministers in Cabinet, and there is very much an importance across all jurisdictions in Australia around the importance of infrastructure. When you look at, we now have infrastructure bodies in nearly every state and territory in Australia.
We have a lot of people involved, we have a lot of talk about it, but there you are down in Melbourne where there are these huge infrastructure projects going on in the pipeline, but not really very much to see for them yet. I mean, is that one of the problems as to how we're approaching infrastructure?
The development of infrastructure does take time. So when we consider the metro that was just opened in Sydney, that took 10 years to complete. Infrastructure's a long-term project, and so all the jurisdictions are very much aware of the requirements of the infrastructure challenge in Australia, and it takes time. So the discussion today has been about what are the challenges and opportunities when it comes to infrastructure, and ensuring that we have the pipeline of projects that's going to respond to that.
So we've had the congestion-busting Minister, Alan Tudge, actually announcing not so much the big projects, but that he's going to be prioritising smaller-scale projects, you know, car parks and pressure points for communities. Do you think that's a good spend?
When we look at the infrastructure challenge across Australia, it requires a range of infrastructure solutions, whether they're small projects that might be at a local or community level, or whether they're the mega projects that are now being built across Australia. It really does take a range of projects to respond to the infrastructure challenge we currently have in Australia.
So you gave us a hint, Romilly, in your 2019 audit, where you said, I think, that there's a major barrier because of infrastructure yet to come in terms of quality of life and the economy. What should be done now?
Infrastructure investment is increasing in Australia, and it's going to require a number of solutions when we consider the 180 challenges and opportunities that we've identified in the Australian infrastructure audit. That includes, and the important thing is, collaboration across government, industry and the community, that we get the infrastructure the community want and need. And so it really is going to take different approaches depending on the location.
Do you feel, having been down there at this big AFR summit, that the states and the federal government can actually get together, or is that one of the big problems?
Australia needs to be recognised for the leadership it's taken in infrastructure leadership and planning and participation. We are the first country that had Infrastructure Australia. We're the first country where we have I-bodies across many of our state jurisdictions. I think we need to reflect on the work that is happening in Australia. We've recognised that there's a challenge, and the states and territories are very much identifying the projects they need to work on, and that is picked up in Infrastructure Australia's infrastructure priority list, which identifies 121 projects around Australia that are classified as nationally significant. I think we should have faith in the fact that our governance is really looking at how we can work together on dealing with these wicked infrastructure issues. But that challenge is real. Population growth is increasing in Australia. We have one of the highest growth rates compared to any other OECD country. And so there really is this push on infrastructure governance and delivery.
You also say that there's been not enough focus on the planning side, and you point out what I'm sure the ordinary punter must think about as well, which is where are all the charging stations for the electric vehicles of the future?
So electric vehicles will happen. It really requires a national response. We currently have 800 electric vehicle charging stations in Australia, and we have over 6,000 petrol stations. The jurisdictions need to be looking at their planning reform, their development applications, to really unlock the potential of putting more charging stations in around Australia, to really let the market drive this increased focus that we need in electric vehicles.
What about the cost for the average Australian of infrastructure today?
Interestingly, if you talk to a consumer in Australia, they would say their household bills, the highest cost would be energy. The highest cost to a household budget is actually infrastructure. If you think about the car, the cost of a car, petrol, running the car and registration, it's actually a higher cost than energy efficiency. When we look at the lower socioeconomic demographic group in Australia, 1/3 of its budget is spent on an infrastructure cost to running the household. So it's incredibly important that we recognise the cost to householders of infrastructure and really looking at bringing down that cost. That may be with increased use of public transport or a range of other solutions that will be developed in the coming years.
Do you think Australia will be shifting away from tolls as a way of funding infrastructure?
In Australia, we need a range of solutions, whether that's road or rail or other public transport or other solutions for infrastructure. We have a growing population and we need a variety of different solutions to match the expectations of our community. So it will be a range of road and rail.
And what about the role of Infrastructure Australia, perhaps in calling some of these projects to account in terms of cost-benefit analysis? Can you see a bigger role for you there?
What's important is that the projects that are over $100 million and are seeking federal government funding, that they undertake a business case. Community have an expectation of that. Further, it would be great to see these projects also do a post-completion review of the effectiveness of their project and make that transparent. The industry and community are demanding that there is accountability and transparency and robustness in these projects, these large-scale infrastructure projects that are happening across Australia. And so they want to see, you know, the effectiveness of the cost, the time, whether there are blowouts, and what we can learn from these projects.
Romilly, I must ask you, there was obviously a lot of buzz down in Melbourne today over Uber's announcement that it is experimenting and using Melbourne as the first city out of the US to float the idea of these Uber helicopters which would move from the airport to the city and presumably elsewhere. I mean, isn't this just a great big PR gimmick?
The Uber announcement today is very interesting. Technological advancements are coming thick and fast when we look at transport around Australia. I will watch the Uber helicopter delivery with interest. I will not be the first person on it, but I think it is really part of what's happening not only in Australia but globally. Yes. In the advances in technology and how that's helping with access, costs and quality when it comes to transport.
Romilly Mathew, thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Tikki. All the best.